Welcome back, everybody. My name is Randy Townsend, and I'm pleased to moderate this next session. This is the perfect session to wrap up the morning and leave us with food for thought before lunch. Fostering a culture of ongoing refinement will feature presentations, first from representatives from the GW Journal of Ethics in Publishing, and then from the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. We'll take questions after both presentations. So right now, I'll turn it over to Lois, Hind, and Haley.
Hind, Haley, and I are going to be talking about GWJEP, the George Washington University Journal of Ethics in Publishing. I am going to give a bit of an overview of the journal's inception and operational journey, quite a journey it's been. And then Hind is going to give her insights as this year's managing editor, and Haley is going to walk us through a committee case study of how it was set up and what they're working on. And so for a brief introduction for me, I will briefly also introduce them, but Haley and Hind, feel free to add any more details in. My name is Lois. I am the editor-in-chief right now. Randy, who introduced us, he was the founding editor-in-chief, and I also work for the American Psychological Association as peer review director. So I work in publishing. Peer review is through and through my thing. And so for the journal itself, do we have the PowerPoint up? I can keep going. The journal is a student-managed journal that publishes on topics related to ethics in publishing, and that covers anything from book banning, increasing diversity in publishing, like the ethics of Amazon, ethics of open access, everything within that. So John initially had this idea in 2019, and then by the end of the year, he already had things moving. He had realized a publication like this would fill a niche, and it also would provide an opportunity for the students in the publishing master's program to get hands-on experience of, what peer review actually looked like. The program also has like a book club, the Ethics in Publishing Conference, and now the Symposium. So it's also important for John to build community and have these discussions within publishing. And so John selected Randy as the first editor-in-chief. They established the scope of the journal, conceptualized the whole structure, and then recruited the initial editorial board, which included me as an associate editor, and the student committees. And so we have the different committees that are content, editorial, e-publishing, marketing, and strategy and sustainability. We also have advisors from the field, and we're looking at adding more in to support the different committees. And so it's fully like journal managed. I kind of help guide things, but the students do a fantastic job keeping the journal going. And so just kind of brief, again, covering of the beginnings. Much of the first year with John and Randy was focused on investigating the different publishing platforms, creating the logo, article formatting, and submission standards, and then just really establishing the overall vision of what the journal was supposed to be. And at that time, the initial submissions were starting to undergo peer review. And so one of the big things that we, upfront were dealing with was, what's the technology involved? What are we using it for? And so I'm not even sure who it was. It's John or Randy set up the first files for reviewer tracking, submission tracking, and copy editing. And so it was all in Google Drive. And then we had Manifold, a publishing platform for, actually putting the articles out. There was another platform tested by our e-publishing committee at that time, but the graduate program also uses Manifold in classes and for other publishing projects. So it made a lot of sense to just use the platform that students were already being trained in. And then it was 2020. So obviously we were very heavily in Zoom and email for different meetings and other communications. And then LinkedIn was used for most of our outreach at that time. And so go back to that. So the pros and cons of the technologies we were using, because so much, since we're completely, virtually managed as a journal, we needed to make sure the files and everything were going to be easily accessible and everything was going to be sustainable between semesters and academic years. So we are using Google Drive, and that is very convenient because you can do all the file sharing, you can edit everything together. But we ran into a lot of different access issues with, people needing access or logging in, trying to get the different email addresses. And so it did mean like finding the different files and returning to work and which could be, a little tedious sometimes, but overall works. But what we did find was that tracking peer review and keeping a reviewer pool tracked and updated in Google Docs, even though it sounds simple, it does cause headaches. We have a lot of turnover due to students graduating or getting new jobs. The program's 2 years. And so if somebody starts and then they want to have a semester or two to get comfortable before they join the journal, then they only have a year left. And sometimes they get a job mid-semester, which is fantastic because the program is to prepare them for publishing. And so if they then get a job, that's been successful. So we have to make sure that everything is sustainable when people rotate off. And so at that point, we were having a little bit of a challenge making sure we had the full communication history. And so we established a couple of different processes where the students, when they were inviting reviewers or sending, the reminders or decision letters, we're going to, copy me as editor or copy a journal email address that John had set up. But sometimes it would get dropped in the back and forth. Authors might not CC the email. They just, only responded to one person, or, something happened. And so then we implemented something where the students were downloading the emails, putting them in a file. So we had that history, but that was also kind of done inconsistently due to turnover. So what we discovered between Randy's tenure as editor and then mine was that, we didn't have a lot of documentation about the expectations because everything was currently being established and then they were in flux. So things were getting lost during the transitions, and the students weren't always then being trained consistently because the new leads were trying to maybe update what we were doing. And what we discovered is that you really need to establish things before you start iterating on them and just have it very clear up front. And then Manifold, it's very easy to publish on. You can learn the basics very quickly. And we have an e-publishing committee right now that's been really looking into more of the options and exploring the different design elements and accessibility features. And so other experiments and iterations that we did when we were trying to ensure better continuity was, let's have, more of a chat room. Let's use Slack. So it's not just emails, because back and forth emails start getting very lengthy, and, you have all these paragraphs and 8 people responding. And so Slack was easier when you wanted to have a very quick communication, but maybe it needed to still be a little, asynchronous. And then we had Trello to track the movement of articles through peer review, and then committee projects and tasks. And if you haven't used Trello, it's, project management software. You have little cards, you move through different boards. It's very visual, very nice to use. But between both of those, since those were 2 new platforms that students were having to log into, in addition to, Manifold to actually publish the articles, people were inconsistently logging in or not necessarily getting the alerts. And so at the end of the day, what we discovered was that having multiple systems created a barrier for the work, because it created too many places for students to check while they're already busy with school and work and lives. And as the panel just discussed, when you get toward midterms or in that busy season, priorities get pretty overloaded. So we needed to keep things very structured and very simple. We also tested a handful of peer review systems because we were really thinking like we need something streamlined, and we wanted the students in the publishing program to get that exposure to what the systems look like, since that's a core part of the focus of the program too. And so now the technology wins that we have are that, we still use Google Drive for, meeting minutes, onboarding documents, and copy editing, and that works very well. One of our previous managing editors started using Discord, and very similar to Slack, pretty much the same, but the students were already using this for informal class chats. And so that meant they were already in there, they already had their alerts set up, or they were already regularly looking in it, which meant that there wasn't that additional barrier to overcome in terms of engagement. And so that, since we were going to where the students already were, they adopted it very quickly, immediately, nonstop chats. Like, I'll wake up and have like all these conversations that happened at like midnight the night before, I'm asleep, but then I get to catch up if there's questions or anything like that. And they can just check in with each other very quickly. And they're very good about saying like, oh, who's busy, who can pick this up, and communicating when they just can't get things done, or if somebody needs to volunteer for something else. So it really became an important collaboration tool. And then the biggest thing to me by far is we have now added in Scholastica as our peer review platform. We started using it in the fall, but it's actually made the tracking of peer review much easier, very fast, immediately. I can check in on things and make sure I'm moving them forward when the students are busy. So if it's around end of semester, all the projects are due, or it's the holidays and they have all the competing priorities, I can send messages, check in, just make sure things are on track. It's easier for authors, reviewers, and student committees. It's very efficient, easy to use. And so it's that added value as well for the students to get to learn that part of the process. So this has been great for us and means that we can more actively solicit manuscripts because things are able to go through faster. And we can also have our reviewer pool in there. So very streamlined. And so now Hind is going to talk about additional observations from her time as managing editor.
Thank you, Lois. And thank you for everybody who has joined this session. So I'm Hind, and I'm this year's managing editor for the GWJEP. My portion of the presentation will kind of talk about the two branches of my time, my observations. Partially, of course, I'm really interested in ethics and publishing topics and the content that is being published, but I really joined as managing editor because of my interest in kind of learning the operational behind the scenes stuff of a publication like this one. And so one major thing that we want to maybe implement, and my portion of the presentation will be kind of a mixture of observations and things we want to implement. So a more intentional and structured approach to welcoming new members would be fantastic. Right now we have a form where it's kind of an open call for prospective new members, and it is sent to, of course, the journal's publishing program student body. But it would be fantastic to perhaps separate those applications or those forms with a separate form, an application for leadership roles for committee leads, and then a separate one for the managing editor. It would also be helpful to introduce a recommended 1 to 2 year term for committee leads and managing editors. And that depends on graduation timelines to support that stability and that knowledge transfer that Lois kind of touched on. We also want to have committee member guidelines that establish general expectations for size and composition of each committee. Right now, we kind of have that with editorial, where each member kind of has their unofficial role that can be kind of transient. And I think that's okay, but it's good to implement that across committees and to kind of have more of that structure. So marketing right now is kind of like scant, and so it's nice to say these 4 members of marketing, this one does the social media posting and this one does that, and to implement that across committees. It would also be great to have a more consistent meeting infrastructure, which has been challenging. Lois and I are constantly talking about what works best in terms of communication needs for the journal. And so, yes, Discord seems to work for students because that is the platform that is also used within the program to discuss classes. And so that's just a matter of switching to another channel on a platform that students are already regularly using. But we are also, of course, always going to run into challenges with working with everybody's meeting schedule. So it would be great to have more of that established ahead of time. We can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. And then the second branch of my observations of managing editor have been mostly about scaling, of course. We want to see the journal grow. It's fantastic that so much of the journal's engagement comes from the program itself, whether it's from students or faculty or postgraduate students who are now contributing to the journal as authors. But of course, we eventually want to grow beyond that. We want to grow beyond that now, but those things take time. I have a bit of a background in marketing, and so I'm biased in this way. I'm always going to think that more marketing structure can only benefit a publication in the long run. I think we all know that. Having more of that scattered informal marketing effort, and again, that's primarily because people graduate and then you have a new marketing team in the following year. So, having a more consistent digital engagement model will obviously work in our benefit. We have a presence on LinkedIn and Instagram. We're able to pull analytics from those platforms. So having a more consistent posting schedule won't be a challenge. It's very doable. It's just kind of getting that committee together to create that structure again. And then we can grow to other channels. We want to obviously advertise the journal so that we have potential contributors and authors who come in beyond and outside of the program. So marketing is needed for that external outreach. And then we, of course, our goal is to implement one issue per term, per semester. So spring, summer, and for the fall. And because that is digitally produced, a digital engagement model obviously works best. All of these moving parts come together, of course, when we consider a more scaling for peer review. So Lois and I have talked about this before, and of course, peer review is her passion, but there's a reluctance for us to solicit more manuscripts and scale that side of things without a more consistent onboarding and offboarding structure. Those things, of course, come hand in hand. So everything I've discussed leading up to, scaling for peer review are all moving parts that kind of need to lock into place. And so my interest has been in finding these gaps, these operational gaps, and kind of trying to close some of them or set up SOPs with Lois so that it creates more of that confidence for journal members and that structure and that foundation. The final thing that Lois also touched on, and we'll talk about a couple times in this presentation, is designating more faculty or experts in the industry in committee kind of aligned industries, committee specific industry expertise, meaning a marketing expert for the marketing committee. We have a strategy and sustainability advisor for that committee, but having more consistent mentorship from those advisors would really be wonderful, again, to fill in those gaps where the editor-in-chief or the managing editor can't always kind of fill. And so to give you a closer look at how that internal strategy comes to life within a specific committee, I'll turn this over now to Haley, who is our strategy and sustainability committee lead, and she'll kind of walk us through how her committee approaches all of the above.
The Strategy and Sustainability Committee is a bit different than the other journal committees. We do not have a set list of tasks to perform in the publishing life cycle of the journal. We are utilized as support in various organizational capacities as needed. Our work can be completely different from year to year and even from semester to semester. Also, this is a great place for people that are new to the publishing industry to get in, because here all backgrounds can contribute. In fact, the more diverse for us, the better. I don't think there is really one thing that we are looking for other than a desire to learn and participate. I started in the position of team lead in September of 2023 at the beginning of the academic year. It was my first position on the journal staff and my first position in publishing as well. I didn't know what strategy and sustainability was in general, or specifically as it pertained to publishing. It is not as easily definable as, say, EPUB or marketing. Additionally, there was not a structure in place to train me. I got a very bare bones list of priorities without an overall vision of the committee's purpose. Next slide. At that beginning point, I did have a committee, but most of those members quickly ended up moving on for various reasons. Over that first year, it ended up being somewhat of a revolving door of members. That has been my biggest challenge. As Lois mentioned, the Journal of Ethics being run with student volunteers has a high turnover rate to begin with. Also, with strategy and sustainability, people don't know what they're signing up for. And because there's not an onboarding process other than me introducing myself and letting them know what we're working on, there really wasn't a way to train them. Strategy and sustainability didn't have a clear vision at that time. And it seemed that committee members would be assigned when their first choice of committee was not available. And then they were not very interested in the work that we were doing. Next slide. When I started my second year as team lead, I had almost no committee left. I knew that my main priority was going to be recruiting members that were willing to stick around and knew what they were getting into. Lois, Hind, and I strategized on what our projects would be and then used those to advertise more specifically what the new members would be working on. We have had much better participation and retention this second year. The committee has made some really fantastic contributions to the journal that will lay foundations for long-term strategic growth. The emphasis being on strategic. We have specific goals and some milestones to aim for rather than just shooting for whatever seemed pressing at the time. Next slide. In conclusion, I thought I would briefly share what strategy and sustainability has worked on this year. 2 of our members conducted a review of other George Washington University journals and journals from other universities. They performed an analysis of how those journals function, what systems they use, and other relevant comparison points. We also reviewed JEP's author agreement to see where that stands. Next, we are currently doing research to get ready for indexing and getting an impact factor for the journal. And lastly, we have started looking into developing the onboarding process, and hopefully that will be a journal-wide initiative collaborating with other committees. So thank you.
Thank you. So Hind is going to give us just a quick kind of wrap up of lessons learned because we just have a couple minutes left on our time. So go ahead, Hind.
Thank you, Lois, and thank you, Haley. So yes, just to wrap up, we want to set clear workflows early and of course allow them to evolve as needed. Look at that backlog of tasks and projects and prioritize as needed. We want to maintain, of course, regular meeting schedules. That's a major lesson that we've learned. Document those key tasks to support those semester transitions across academic years and keep those initiatives focused and time bound. And of course, whatever processes need retraining each term need to be identified and expanded on. Would you like for me to also present on future focus? I don't want to go over time.
Yeah, just quickly go through the points, I would
say. Yeah, sure. So kind of a similar thing to lessons learned, but more about what we're actually going to do in the future. So more consistency in operations across those academic years we've already mentioned, maintain that 3-issue annual publishing goal, and expand on article topics for greater diversity. That's a major one for just the content of the publication itself. Of course, we want more avenues for student participation in industry events, such as, but not limited to, conferences, and to, of course, build more mentorship through those designated committee advisors.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. One thing I'll mention before turning it over to Randy in the next panel, we are now launching a university press in the program. And so part of what we're dealing with now is like, how does the journal fit in with the university press and vice versa?
All right, please join me in welcoming Merinda and Janaynne from the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign.
Hi, everyone. We're so glad to be here. This has been an excellent conference so far, and I've heard several of our colleagues mention peer review. So Janaynne and I are happy to talk to you about our experience at the University of Illinois. So my name is Merinda Hensley. I am an associate professor and research support liaison at the University of Illinois Library. And I am involved in several areas of undergraduate research at my institution, not just managing undergraduate journals, but also managing undergraduate theses and capstone projects. I manage an image of research competition every spring where students can submit any kind of image along with a brief narrative about their research. And we have cash awards for that, which is really exciting. And I also serve on the board for our Office of Undergraduate Research. I have an area of research myself around scholarly communication and information literacy, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. I want to give Janaynne an opportunity to introduce herself.
Thank you, Merinda. So I am Janaynne. I am a social anthropologist in information science from Brazil, and I'm a postdoc at the University of Illinois. And my research is about public participation in peer review and peer review training. And I also teach courses on scholar communication and library and service programs.
So Janaynne and I met because she was offering some workshops as part of our Savvy Researcher series on peer review for mostly graduate students and faculty. And then we started talking about undergraduates and what a peer review program would look like in that kind of environment. For librarians, when we're talking about what it means to be information literate, we mean that students can find and use and evaluate information in ethical ways. But part of that also is their responsibility as authors. And so this language on the screen that you're seeing is part of our framework for information literacy from my professional association. We talk a lot about how scholarship is a conversation, meaning that communities of scholars, researchers, or professionals engage in sustained discourse with new insights and discoveries occurring over time as a result of varied perspectives and interpretations. And what we're really trying to get at here is the nuances that happen when a researcher at any stage of their academic career is authoring materials and what their responsibility is throughout that process and what that looks like. Because our journals are becoming more prevalent at the University of Illinois, we have an increasing number of them, trying to figure out how we're going to provide onboarding and training so that students can sustain their journals themselves. The peer review process is the crux of that. And so Janaynne and I have been trying to figure out what that would look like, especially because our journals are in lots of different stages of development. And in a few minutes, Janayne's going to tell you about more details about the journals themselves, about the workshops that we've been teaching, sorry. So I think I had just one more thing I wanted to say, which is that our process here is to deliver a curriculum to the students, not just one-off workshops. We're really trying to figure out how to integrate peer review into their process as managing the journal, but also into the library's process and the iSchools process and helping them think about what peer review means. Hand it over to you, Janaynne.
Thank you, Merinda. So as since I was a PhD student, I would like to design a workshop series. And as Merinda mentioned, here at the University of Illinois, I have this opportunity. I was connected, one of my postdoc mentors connected me to Merinda, and she gladly accepted the idea. So what happened that I dropped it, the 6 workshops. So we start with the history of the peer review process, and we discuss the role of the reviewers, bias in the peer review process, not only from the side of the reviewers, but from the side of authors and editors. We also approach peer review policies and also open peer review. So we first try like this peer review for undergraduate students, like the also graduate students, staff, and editors for all of this audience. And then Merinda invited me, she suggests that we could give some of these workshops for the undergraduate students who are running journals here at the University of Illinois. So we found out that would be for them, like they are very interested to understand the role of the reviewer and how to peer review a paper, and also how to write and evaluate a peer review report, how a good peer review report look like. And also we provide some workshops and discussions about how they could improve the peer review policies of their journals. So we are sharing the first experience of organizing these workshops in this paper published this year. We have faced many barriers from the side of logistics and outreach. And also we find out, we came up with some ideas about how to improve the next workshops as well. And also I was a fellow of the ASAP Bio. So I suggest Merinda, and she was very hard supportive about giving them a lecture about preprints. And we find out there that many of the undergraduate students, they haven't heard even about what is a preprint. So we had the chance to introduce preprints, how they could post, cite, and review preprints. And also, for example, what was the difference between preprint review and peer review in a journal, and regarding also, for example, which journals accept preprints or what journals do not accept preprints. So we have a very positive experience with this talk as well about preprints for undergraduate students. So I want to mention that my interest in peer review training and is related to my research on public participation in the peer review process, because I have a research where I'm studying how the public can participate in the peer review process of academic journals. And one of the arguments against this public participation in the peer review process is the lack of qualification of the peer reviewers. So I thought, why not start to investigate how we can deliver peer review training and how we can improve the quality of the peer review reports and then the quality of research as well. But more than this, how we can see the peer review process as a tool to increase science literacy, and mainly think about the undergraduate students, how we can address peer review, use peer review, not only thinking then about future researchers, but also as citizens who has the right to understand science, criticize science, and evaluate science as well. So this project also involves, for example, here is a case study that I'm working on with one of my undergraduate mentees, where we have started to test how much peer review training research, like the preview, is accessible for undergraduate researchers. Because we took a look at some peer review training materials, for example, many of these materials to download, like PDF, and many of these resources, they say, these resources for early career researchers and also senior researchers, and we have a hypothesis that the peer review training materials should be designed in a way that would meet the needs of undergrad researchers and then graduate researchers and then senior researchers. And yes, these ideas is related to my projects, and I'm glad that Merinda is supporting and also is part of these initiatives as well.
So this is part of the policy of the Illinois Student Undergraduate Research Journal, which is the campus-wide journal that our institution has designed over the last 2 years. They published their first issue this past spring. Like lots of undergraduate journals, we've had a few bumps along the way, and the succession planning, as many have mentioned, is one of our biggest issues here, trying to smooth things out. That being said, the peer review training really is the core piece of what our educational curriculum looks like at this point. I feel like we have an opportunity here to work with students through the entire process of publishing their work. And so that wouldn't be just peer review, that's also helping them understand the importance of open science and helping them to see the bigger picture. And librarians talk about this a lot, which is that our tax dollars go towards science and that science should be freely available. And when students are contributing to the academic enterprise in higher education, we really want to engage them in that conversation so that they have an opportunity to take that into their professional lives and advocate along the way throughout their lives. And so this is just the beginning place for them. I feel like what we've done here, lots of institutions have started to do. We're by no means original in this sense, but I think that we're all trying to figure out what it means to bring students into the peer review process, a process that for professionals takes a lot of training and a lot of expertise. And so, for example, one of the things that we focus on that Janaynne mentioned is writing the reports. What does it look like to write a solid peer review report? And so there's the practicality piece, but there's also the overarching piece of seeing themselves as part of a larger ecosystem. Yes, that's the rest of the outline of the journal and what our students are looking for in accepting pieces for their for this specific journal, which accepts all disciplines. And what I really want to point out here is that there's lots of different levels at which the students are focused on in their peer reviews. And so having a couple of students that also have mentors that have been working through the journal for the last couple of years is really the place that we are looking to get to at this point, because we've only been in play with this particular journal for a couple of years. We don't have enough trained students to train the incoming students yet. We're still working on that. We have 4 other journals at Illinois and 2 in progress. And because they're all in different stages of development, they're not in a place ready to do the peer review parts just yet. We're just in the discussion phase with most of those. Our most established journal, unfortunately, we lost due to COVID, which was our English Lit journal. So yeah, that's unfortunate. So I think just closing here, what and I'll pass it here to Janaynne in a second, is that because of the turnover of students, that's the biggest weakness of any kind of educational program like this. And while I provide quite a bit of leadership as a librarian and some consistency for the students, because it's their journal, we're trying to figure out ways for them to take the reins and really be the leadership on the peer review training, even though we will do some of that down the line as well.
Yes, I would like to highlight the importance of partnerships to make peer review training initiatives happen, at least in my experience. I would say my first partnership here was with Merinda and the University Library. And I would say that was very successful because we could address together many challenges. I'm also working with other departments of the university now to continue delivering peer review workshops and training. So we wouldn't do this alone. So I think the partnerships was very important to be successful and to put together not only the design of the trainings, but also research on peer review training and research on peer review in general to deliver, to prepare the content. Because when we deliver the workshops here, we have not only we are not only using existent research like the peer review materials, but also research on peer review to discuss many concepts like validity, originality, and relevance of research and what it means in the context of the peer review process. So for this future work, we hope to continue work together, Merinda and I, and do some improvements about not only understand better the needs and interests and motivations of undergraduate students to participate in the peer review process, how we can motivate them, how we can recognize them for their work as peer reviewers and their work also working in journals. And also we are considered to design this peer review workshops not only for undergraduate students, but with the undergraduate students itself, as Merinda has explained, because for us it's really important to give them autonomy and independence, like to be part of this initiative. So it's not only for them, but also with them, I would say. And that's all from my side. I don't know what Merinda would like to complement.
Yeah, that's good. I guess I want to close with sharing a research project that I'm working on. Both Janaynne are doing research separately and also together. And I will be working on a project this fall on my sabbatical, interviewing students who have published in undergraduate journals about their experience and what that looks like for them. And I'll be really excited to share that. So I hope you'll watch for that in the spring. So we're glad to be here. We're happy to take your questions, and we appreciate being on this panel with our peers as well. Thanks so much. Thanks, John.
Thank you so much. We'll open it up for questions now.
Hi, thank you for the talks. My question's about the Illinois family of journals. Do you seem to have the broad undergraduate research journal, but then the other members of the family seem to be discipline specific? And I'm curious, do you have any control over how these journals develop? And is there any risk of these journals poaching each other in terms of things could go in one issue versus another?
Oh, that's so interesting. That's a really good question. I have a good example for you too. It's true that we started off with disciplinary journals, and the director of our original Office of Undergraduate Research wanted it that way. He didn't want an overarching journal. He really wanted them to be separate disciplinary pieces on their own. And some students in engineering came to us a couple years ago with this proposal. So we worked with the new office, the new director, to figure out what that would look like. We do have a bioscience journal and another psychology journal, and they're starting to think about what it looks like for them to partner together. They've been talking about working with a high school, local high schools, and helping the students in high school to think about what it would look like to write a paper to be included in a journal that would be a combination of their two journals. So we'll have to see what that looks like. But it's true that it's possible that they can poach each other. As far as to the question about control, I don't control or dictate what the students decide that they want to do, but they usually do find me, and I do walk them through the process of what it looks like to set up the journal. So we talk about policies and guidelines and succession planning and faculty mentors and all of that, funding, printing. We go through everything. And I did have a student who came through last year who wanted to create an economics journal. And there's a really great one published at Illinois Wesleyan University, which is about an hour from us. And those students do a really good job doing intake of submissions from students all over the country. So I managed to nudge him in the direction to say, you know, there's this other journal that's very well established. If you'd like to publish in that journal, that's a really good place. In part, I did that because the student didn't come with a team of other students. It was just him by himself. And you know, as we can see from listening to our peers, the most successful journals have consistent mentoring and leadership from different elements of campus as well, not just the students. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Hi, this is also for Merinda. I was curious, how does peer review work with undergraduate capstones and theses, and what that project is like?
Yeah, so what I've been working on the last few years is implementing a database called Vireo, which is what a lot of institutions use for their graduate dissertations for intake purposes, because our campus, probably like a lot of campuses, is really decentralized, and there is no formal intake of all of those undergraduate theses and capstone projects into a single system until I came along. So I've been working with LAS, partly liberal arts and sciences, because they have lots of different disciplines within their college. And we have been, you know, ironing out the bumps in the road around that database. And the biggest problem actually is that we are waiting for an upgrade to the system where when the students submit their thesis and their certification form, that gets sent an email to their advisor who signs off on it. And then the student can decide if they want their work to go into the institutional repository, which then will make it publicly available. But that's the review of those undergraduate theses and capstone projects is the faculty. And so we've had a couple of situations over the years when I was letting students submit their work into our institutional repository. They were not always checking with the faculty, or the faculty said yes, but they didn't really know what that meant. They didn't read through and realize, oh, the student shared a part of their research they didn't want public, or something like that. And so LAS is responsible for, the honors program is responsible for reviewing those final papers, if you will, but there's no peer review of them as far as I know. I'm starting to work my way around campus to see about pulling the rest of campus into this system for next spring 2026. And then we'll see what kind of processes they have in place. But I suspect that we're going to see a lot of issues around research ethics and faculty and students not thinking through what it means to finish a thesis that's then put online. So thanks for asking your question.
Thanks. Next we'll take a question from online from Victoria. She has a question about publishing categories. Is there an impact factor for each category and site score? Should we be tracking this day to day?
I guess I can take that since Haley had talked about impact factors. So those usually come out, it's like once a year. There are a lot of different categories. Honestly, for our journal, it's very, like we're kind of ahead of ourselves really looking at it. But the idea is that, you know, we're a newer journal. We want to make sure that what we're doing and what we're thinking about it will, you know, let us be indexed and let us kind of pursue that later on. So it's aspirational. But yeah, like, you know, look it up, look at the different categories. It's talked about a lot where it's not the only metric that journals should be looking at for value, but it does consistently be the one that, you know, in the sciences and other fields that like tenure committees look at for academic journals for that. So it's us kind of looking ahead and planning. But yeah, take a look at them. There's a lot of categories.
Thanks, Lois. Any other questions? I have a quick question about the peer review, and I think either groups can probably answer it. Can you talk about how you develop your peer review curriculum? You're training people that are kind of new to the ecosystem and you want to inspire them. Can you talk about how you develop your curriculum so that it's consistent? I've seen there's a lot of different trainings that are out there. How did you determine what was best for your programs?
Okay, I can take that one. So actually, Randy, I think, was the one that developed our peer review, or maybe John, our peer review rubric first and had the training on our website. And so it kind of broke down exactly the different questions that reviewers should look at in the papers and just all sorts of questions. They didn't have to answer all of them. But to help people familiarize themselves with what they should be looking at for the paper. And since we've gone into Scholastica, we pared it down a bit just to make it a little easier to, you know, put it into the form. We figured out which questions are most applicable for the different types of submissions we get. One of the things we have been talking about this semester is more outward facing resources for the reviewers, because at different conferences when we've talked to people, and I run into this with my day job as well, is people who are very qualified to do the review say, oh, I could never do a review. I don't know how to do that. And so we want to have more outreach to say, like, yes, you're an expert. You can read this paper. You can give your feedback. That's essentially what peer reviewing is applying your expertise and your thoughts to it. And so, you know, we have the rubric, but we do want to do more training, like maybe webinars, things like that, to really pull people in. Because I think that it's easy to think, oh yeah, people know this, but then you're accidentally excluding a lot of people who would want to take part in the process.
I just wanted to add a little bit to that. So in terms of coming up with the peer review framework, I did kind of come up with the original ideas, but it was part of a class I was teaching at the time, and the students put input into it and developed it. So kind of what we're using now was developed in the class. And I'll also just mention, you know, just in general in publishing, a lot. So Lois's day job, she mentioned she's peer review director for the American Psychological Association. A lot of us in publishing, we manage peer review processes. We don't necessarily do peer review ourselves. So part of what we're trying to do is get people in publishing to do peer review and to write articles about publishing. Because again, publishers often are publishing other people's work, not necessarily publishing our own work. So that's one of the goals of the journal, is to get publishers to write about publishing and to do peer review about publishing.
Yeah, I will say, I'll add that being on the other side of it now as editor and working with the actual peer reviewers on the content, I always have empathy for the people who are doing peer review, but man, it really really makes you really makes you aware of like rejecting an article, how bad you feel about that, or like really wanting to work with authors to make things better. And yeah, so it increased my empathy for my own editors and reviewers even more.
That's a really good point to make. And Janaynne can talk a little bit about how she developed our curriculum for us. I just want to say one thing, which is that I've been a scholar for 20 years and no one taught me how to be a peer reviewer. I learned it by the seat of my pants, and I learned it through practice. And the key moment for me was when I was reviewing for a journal, that once the peer review process was over on a specific paper, they opened the peer reviews to everyone so we could see what other reviewers had written. And I learned a lot from that process. So, providing that insight was really helpful. And that's what we tried to do with undergrads. But Janaynne can tell you about that better than I can.
So I think here at the University of Illinois, we got some feedback from some attendees that they prefer the workshops in person. So we are pushing the feedbacks or the workshops to be in person, because one of the reasons that I was trying to understand why they like so much in person is because they like the interaction. Usually when we teach about peer review, everybody has a story to tell. So, and when they like to tell their stories, and they like to talk and get feedback about, for example, when we applied a activity about write a peer review report, they want to get feedback. And what I have learned here from some people that sometimes they go to online environments and they watch a video, but they don't get any feedback about that peer review report that they are trying to write, for example. And we like to use a lot of resources because we have many resources about peer review. But one thing that also we have done is to adapt those resources to our audience. One example, for example, when I download the peer review template and apply in the classroom, where, for example, let's suppose we give them 20 minutes to address each part of the paper. So instead of giving them 20 minutes exactly as it is in the template, the original template, the original resource, we extend the time to them to address those questions. Because also it's important because we want not to rush them in the learning process. We want to give them time to interact. And another thing that we learning when teaching the peer review process, it's also the point of the digital literacy. What I have observed that if you come to in classes, here is the template for you to review a paper, and I'm showing here in the slides a preprint platform. But sometimes many of the students, they have never accessed a preprint server or even a journal website. So there is a distance between you say a lot of things to them, and when they have to do the thing like access the platform, there is a barrier regarding how to understand, how to access that platform. So what we are doing also now is also when we have to select a room to give the workshops, we have computers, built-in computers in that room where they can do the review and access the platform or the journal website at the same time to promote digital literacy and also peer review literacy at the same time.
Great, thank you. All right, so big thanks to everyone on the panels today, for Janaynne and Merinda, Haley, and Hind, and also Lois. Thank you all, and I think we move into lunch right now, right?